All right, everybody. Welcome to a new edition and episode of Finding Common Battlegrounds. The format's a little different. Participants have changed, but we're here. We're back. We're going to try and make this work. Yeah, we're excited about this. So,
Woo-hoo.
yeah, real excitement here. I'm one of the longtime members, Ryan Cragen. I've changed roles, though. So I'm now going to be the moderator. And we have a new member, Nate Triplett. You'll recognize the last name. He is a relative of Tom's. Let's see, Nate, do you want to kind of describe your relationship to Tom and how you're related to Tom?
Yeah. So Tommy's my estranged uncle. No, I'm just kidding. Not really estranged, but Tommy's my uncle. We spend a lot of time, probably too much time talking about. I try to spend too much time talking about politics at family events, and so every time I'm around, it tends to get brought up. So Tom asked me to come be on the podcast as he figured it might be a good fit. So thanks for inviting me. Really excited to be here. But yeah.
Excellent. And just so, I mean, this is pretty obvious, right? Tom, you need no introduction. You're obviously a longtime member. You've just switched roles as well. Nate is going to be donning the progressive hat, right? So the liberal progressive hat. Tom is now donning the conservative hat for the podcast.
Yeah,
And the other thing,
I'm getting off the sidelines. I'm like jumping in the ring here. It's what so I'm excited.
Tag,
Yeah.
you're in, Tom. You've been tagged in. The other big change is our structure. So listeners who are continuing with us will realize, obviously Josh is gone. We've still kept it in the family, so now it is a triplet debate instead of a Cragen debate. But this is kind of fun. Our old format, we tried to find common ground in a very specific way. We've changed that a little bit by actually trying to find common battlegrounds. So we're now not trying to find common ground. We're trying to find things that we can actually agree to dislike and critique. So the structure is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to kind of put forward a topic, and then both of them are going to critique whatever is happening, right? Or whatever the idea is, but potentially from different perspectives. So the idea is that both of them are going to try and critique something. Their critiques may not be the same. They may have different assumptions, different foundational approaches, but the idea is that they're both going to be able to find a way to critique, and then it'll just turn into a discussion. And we have kind of one issue that's going to be conservative every podcast and one that's going to be a progressive issue. And we're going to see how well this works. So that's the idea. Anything else you two want to add before we jump into our first topic? No?
Pretty straightforward. I made sure to.
We're trying this out, right? So we're gonna
Yes.
see how this goes, and if we like it or if we don't like it, and figure out something that we really like. I mean, this may or may not be it, but we'll see.
Yeah. And if people have feedback, of course, you can drop it in the comments. You can email one of us. Happy to get those comments. So our first one, old time listeners will realize, right? I'm in Florida, and obviously Florida, it gets more attention than it probably should. It's a weird state. We got weird things going on, but it is in the news for some relatively prominent issues these days, including the fact that Donald Trump does live in Florida now, and Ron DeSantis is potentially a front runner for the presidential race. So some of those issues do make national attention. One of these actually did. So our first topic did get some national attention, not as much as other things that Ron DeSantis has done, but it is a kind of an interesting topic, something that happened here. And I think it does get to like bigger social issues. And that's why I think it would be a fun topic for the podcast. So background here, Ron DeSantis recently had dozens of former felons in Florida arrested after they voted. Voting laws in Florida were changed a few years ago by a constitutional amendment. So the majority of Floridians actually voted, it has to be more than 60%, to give felons back the right to vote once they had served their time and paid all the restitution necessary for the crimes that they'd committed. However, certain classes of felons, including those arrested for sexual offenses, do not automatically get their voting rights back. The interesting thing about these individuals who all voted is they applied to be able to vote, and the state approved all of those individuals to register to vote, right? So they applied to register to vote, and the state approved them. For the vast majority of the people who were arrested recently, the charges brought by the state have been dropped, which is kind of fascinating. So the question that we're putting forward today, right, and this is kind of a conservative taking some specific action, is how is arresting individuals who are approved by the state to vote harmful to democracy? Who would like to start with this one? Tell you what, let's do this. Tom, you start.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Well, all right. I was just thinking about this because I went to, so for this little time I lived in, I lived in Europe for a little while, and we went to England when I was really young, and I got banned from giving blood at the Red Cross for mad cow disease, right? So I got this letter of permanent deferment, and so I got this email of 6 months ago or something like that. It was like, hey, you're no longer deferred anymore, and I was like, cool. I'm going to, I can give blood. Anyway, so it was blood drive came up. I signed up. I went in and I filled out their 100 question questionnaire. I filled the whole thing out. I went in to give blood, and they were like, oh, it shows that you're deferred. I was like, well, yeah, but they said I'm not deferred anymore. They're like, well, you have to call us this number and get yourself, that means you're eligible to be deferred, but you're not actually deferred, and you need to call this number. And so they gave me the number's still sitting on my desk. I may or may not call at some point, right? I intend to, but I don't know if I will. But basically I didn't get blood, and I don't know if I'll get blood again, right? It's just so it was sort of kind of a crappy experience, and kind of defeated. I'm just okay, whatever. Now you got to do this stuff. So I feel like in a small degree, these guys that okay, I can vote, and then you're like, oh no, oh I can't, oh yeah, you can, but just make sure you do the thing, and you got arrested, and okay, but you're okay, but we, well, that was a crappy experience. Probably never do that again, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. A similar situation where the cop showed up at your house and then arrested you with a felony, right?
Totally, right? That's exactly
totally the same situation.
Red Cross there. Yeah. So
glad you can relate.
Yeah. And but anyway, the point is yeah, I'm okay, you totally, there's a good chance none of them will ever vote again, right? It's and so I totally get that, right? And what was going on there? Was it politically motivated, or was there, or was that just a snafu and just a total mistake, or was it some weird, weird passive aggressive legal thing, right?
I'd argue, Tom, that that's your position to make right there, right? As the conservative critiquing this point, I have a pretty firm stance on this as a progressive. And I would say that is your point to make of, was that a political move?
Right. What do you mean?
What was the point there? What was the point there of why was that made? I think that's the point that I'd like to see you make.
Oh, what? Yeah. And it could have been. I don't know. It totally could have been, right?
Sure.
It could be a fluke, and people are seeing what they want to see, which is it was some, it's Ron DeSantis abusing power, but it totally could have been, right? And so there is this one thing. This is interesting that I did hear. Ryan, tell me if this is correct. I just overheard someone making a comment. I think it was on Fox, and they said that no Democrats won any elections in Florida.
The state level elections. Yeah. So at the state level, which would be statewide office. I think that I need to be clear about that, right? So statewide office, which would be governor, I think lieutenant governor kind of goes with the governor, so but this would be attorney general. So all of the statewide races, but obviously within the state, several, Democrats won different races, but at the statewide, county seats.
Well, are you even talking legislation, the state
state legislature? Democrats still won, so it's statewide, meaning they represent the entire state, right? So statewide, no Democrats won.
It's not as big a deal as I thought. As I was wow, if that's the case, that almost makes it sound like that's a lot of, someone's got a lot of influence there. If that's the case, right? That's But that's not as big a deal as I thought.
No, not quite as bad as
that
you
just
thought,
means they're fairly Republican there,
Yes.
at least at a certain level. So that's interesting. But yeah, it almost like reeked of like there's not manipulation, but you could almost be like, if you're getting that kind of level of allegiance, it's like, well, are they really a Republican there, or is somebody like, greasing the pipes of, whatever.
There is some gerrymandering going on, but that's a different topic for a different time. So just brief summary, right? Sounds like, Tom, what you're saying is, arresting people who registered to vote, presumably, with good intention, they didn't know that they were doing something wrong, is just a major deterrent, right? So the effect is that it's going to make it so those people in particular are never going to vote again, right? Like they're done because the hassle is just too big. And that, do you think then that this would also be a deterrent to other people?
Right. Possibly. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Right.
Okay. All right. So that would be the basis of your critique, is like, this is just a major deterrent for these people and potentially others to never vote again.
Right. Yeah. Getting arrested for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a pretty compelling,
motivation. Vote. You may or may not get arrested. There's a good chance you won't get arrested today.
Yeah. maybe.
Okay.
But you don't know that. Yeah.
Right. So I can't guarantee anything.
Okay. Nate, your take on this.
Oh, I have a lot of takes on this. I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I'm going to try to keep it very.
Did you hear about this did Ryan tell you this, or did you know about this? Did you
Ryan and I have been conspirating on the side about how
no, but I hadn't even heard of this issue until
I've heard about this.
Okay, so it's been in the news.
Yeah. This has definitely been in the news. It's made national headlines. A lot of the political pundits that I listen to that typically on the left have definitely talked about this and criticized DeSantis and the Republican Party for it. So there's a couple points that I think I'd make here that I think are good starting bases. First off is that this is kind of seeing the ramifications of playing political games, for lack of a better term, and trying to make a point or statement that's in line with party politics or party narratives comes down to real world consequences. And that goes in the face of democracy. So when we look at this initial ballot initiative that passed in Florida, this was an initiative that was put on the ballot to essentially open up voting to registered felons, to previously registered felons. And I don't know the exact stipulations of what makes somebody eligible to vote again. But that passed with a majority in Florida. And so when you look at a lot of these ballot initiatives, you'll notice that a lot of the times these are overwhelmingly supported by the general population. A lot of progressive policies are overwhelmingly supported, like allowing former felons to vote. And so that was a Democratic initiative that the people voted on and passed through in Florida. Well, DeSantis goes through and says, hey, the conservative party, and of course I'm going to make a lot of assumptions here, but I don't have any problems making assumptions about DeSantis's motives. DeSantis goes through and says, hey, a really big hot topic issue for conservative voters at the moment is fair and free elections. This is a hot topic issue on both sides, and we need to be cracking down harder on potential voter fraud. So he rolls out essentially an initiative saying that we need to essentially go arrest these people. Whether or not that was intentional, it doesn't really matter to me, because it's the point of I'm trying to play to this larger narrative of we're going to be tough on voting and crack down on voter fraud. But what happens is that affects everyday people who are just trying to do the right thing and actually vote. You've got former felons that went out to vote, and then when you watch a lot of these videos, you have the cops showing up at the specific article that Ryan sent us. So
you think this was DeSantis trying to do, this was him kind of playing to his base, sending a political message, that this was, he orchestrated this?
100%. Now the intended outcome may not have been to go and arrest people who voted legitimately. That is part of the consequences that came with the
you're saying
notion
he
of
was
I want to
orchestrating a crackdown, and then these guys got swept up in it.
I mean, in my opinion, the right is orchestrating this narrative that voter fraud exists in the US on a level that does not actually exist. There is voter fraud in the US, but it is not this rampant issue that the right likes to make it out to be. And so a part of trying to push that narrative is cracking down and finding cases of voter fraud. Well,
like,
when they're cracking down on this,
who are trying to vote,
we got all these felons who are voting illegally, which technically, before this ballot initiative passed last year, that was illegal. But to classify that as voter fraud, technically on paper is voter fraud, not voter fraud anymore.
Was there evidence that like DeSantis orchestrated this?
Oh, he absolutely orchestrated it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and some useful details, right? So the population of the state of Florida is almost 22 million people. He found roughly 20 who had voted supposedly illegally. And of course, the interesting part about this is a lot of those charges have now been dropped because the state that DeSantis runs, right, is who approved them when they tried to register to vote. The state approved them to vote.
Right.
So it's almost like they were set up. Right, it's like a sting operation, right? No, I don't think they actually
feels that way for the voters.
For them, it clearly does, right? I don't think that was actually the intent, but DeSantis he had a press conference the morning that they were all arrested. So they were all arrested the same morning. He held a press conference, and
he's making a big to do about it.
He did make a big to do about it,
parading this whole thing around.
Yes.
So. Okay. Yeah. How interesting. So were there other? So there was 20 that were arrested and then released, but there was others that were arrested as well. Or
I think there's one who's pled guilty. The rest have all basically the charges have been dropped against him.
Okay. So it's like, look at all these people we found, and then after the day after is like, okay, none of you guys are actually charged.
Right, because the state approved it, right? And I think that's the argument that the judges in the state have basically made is, hold on, this is a little bit more complicated, right? They tried to register to vote because in one case, I think in the article that you got, right, like one guy's brother was like, hey, you should register to vote, right? Like you're legal to vote now. And he's like, okay. So he tried to register to vote and the state approved it. So if the state approves it, you kind of have to go like, oh, I guess it's okay that I can vote, right? I think that's the issue. And then they get arrested, right?
Yeah. Which, and this is the other point I'll make on that is like, I appreciate your attempt to essentially empathize with these people through your anecdote, about donating blood. And I like your point there. I think the part that tends to not be considered by most people is the ramifications that it comes with being somebody who is falsely arrested with a felony, specifically previous felons. Because if the cops show up at my house and arrest me for a felony that I didn't even know, because illegally voting in this scenario is an additional felony, I didn't even know I did wrong. Some of these people even went as far as to say, like, I did my due diligence to call and talk to,
so that I wouldn't get
arrested, right? I did my due diligence to check that I was good to vote. They said I was good. I went and voted, and then the cops showed up at my house and they're arresting me, right? So not only is there the real world consequences of getting a felony, which yes, the state has dropped it, but there's this limbo of however many days it took for the state to actually drop those charges where they have to deal with the consequences of being arrested for a felony. But then there's the additional consequences of being a former felon and being arrested for another felony comes with higher level stakes and higher level charges than just you and I who aren't felons, aren't ex-felons.
Now you're a repeat offender. Yeah.
Exactly. And these are the consequences that, like, I'll try not to get too deep into this. Like when we talk about things like rehabilitation, right? But, you can't rehabilitate people into society when you're creating a fear, which Ron DeSantis loves to do, a fear around the concept of voting. And it comes back to our main point of this is what suppresses the vote, is there may be people who see a situation like this and may not be former felons, even may have just had a misdemeanor, or just may have create some hesitancy of like, I don't know if voting is worth it. I'm not super passionate about voting anyway.
And I don't want something weird to happen.
Having their voice said. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I got that speeding ticket that's a little overdue. So I don't want anything to, totally. Right. So I get that.
So are we finding common ground or common battlegrounds? Basically what we're saying collectively is that doing this, arresting these people, right, who registered to vote, even some of them did the due diligence, right? They tried to make sure like they were legal, like this was allowed. It's going to be a big deterrent for people voting in the future.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, without a doubt.
This is easy. Oh, we're gonna have to try harder to find. I mean, but this is the point, right? Like I think we all can agree that this is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I could argue the effect, like this might not, this isn't going to be your common person, right? This is that this could affect. It might be like you said, someone with a parking ticket that's in a limbo state or a questionable state, but and so it's like, I could see it. It's not that big of an effect or something like that, but like, it's still not good, right? We want everyone to feel like voting safe.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to move on to our second point. So
cool.
Again, just for our listeners, right, we're trying to take like one conservative action and one progressive action and critique that from the different sides. So our next point, not that we should really be talking about Elon Musk all the time, but man, that guy is in the news.
He makes it sure hard
all
not
the time.
to.
He does, right? And so he really likes being in the news. It's like Donald Trump or Elon Musk. Like you just have to talk about each of them every day or something. So we're talking about. I mean, this next topic is about Elon Musk and Twitter. Okay. Obviously, he offered to buy Twitter, months and months ago, then tried to back out of the deal. Twitter's board actually forced him because he had signed a legally binding contract that he was going to purchase Twitter at a really good price. Right. So, side note, right, I actually made money off this deal. I held Twitter, like I had Twitter stock. And so I had to sell it. Right. I didn't have an option. Like, he bought my stock. So thank you, Elon Musk. You made me about $1,000 on your Twitter buy. I appreciate that. That was very kind of you. I don't know how worth it was, but anyway, so the board forces him to complete the deal, which he did in October, right? Since then, he has laid off more than half of Twitter's workforce. Many of the primary advertisers on Twitter have stopped paying for advertising. We don't know all the numbers on that. Because the numbers are a little bit fuzzy, I think. And of course, he's been making a lot of changes. One of those was reinstating Donald Trump's Twitter account. I actually read an article about that today that, of course, he reinstated it, but Donald Trump is not back on the platform.
Right.
He complicated legal situation, but he is legally obligated to post all of his initial posts on Truth Social. Right. So he's signed a binding contract that says he has to post there first.
with Truth Social.
With Truth Social. Yes. Right. The company that he mostly owns, which was actually just merged with a SPAC, right? I don't know if you guys are familiar with SPACs. So it's in the process of merging with a SPAC. So if he were to try and post on Twitter, he could actually get sued by his shareholders in Truth Social, which is a fascinating, complicated situation.
I didn't even realize that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I just happened to catch that today, and I was like, oh wow, that's super interesting. Okay, so the real question here, though, we're flipping that a little bit on its head. So I don't mean this to be like a critique of Elon Musk, and in fact, I kind of get it, right? Like Elon Musk just spent $44 billion to buy this company, and the company is losing money. He also added about $9 billion of debt to Twitter to finalize this purchase. Okay. So the latest numbers I saw is that Twitter is effectively losing $3 million a day.
Right.
That's a lot of money. Okay. Elon Musk is the CEO. Yes, he has a lot of money, but I don't think he bought Twitter to just throw money away. So he does have to do things as the CEO of the company to try and address the fact that it's losing money. Which raises this question. Are the media attacks on Musk's Twitter management really fair? Okay. So in essence, the point is, can we critique how the media is treating Elon Musk, who does in fact now own a company, and he's trying to stop the bleeding because the company is losing money? And let's flip this time. So Nate, you get to go first.
This is a hard one. I'm not going to lie.
I wanted to go
I have
first on this one.
Do you want to go first, Tom?
I mean, I'm okay with that.
Oh, that's fine.
I mean, you're the one
do it, Tom.
Yeah, go for it.
This was your topic. So
all right, yeah. 'Cause I do have a lot to say about this one.
Good.
Perfect.
This one gets me. Here's the thing. So Ryan owns a Tesla. I don't own a Tesla. I wouldn't consider myself a Tesla fanboy by any means, but I do think this one, it just gets me worked up for some reason. It's like,
Perfect. Me too. For different reasons.
The amount of media like negativity, just like attacking Elon for he laid off people while they were, a person while they were, on maternity leave with their kid and stuff like that, and just like he made an employee cry, and just like this painting this villain. So this actually came. I've been thinking about this. The story came up on the New York Post. This is Chris Hayes. So he's the I think it's MSNBC anchor.
Mm-hmm.
So he did a guest essay. And so he actually have a summary of it here, and I'm just going to go through it just a little bit. It basically, so he says, in a New York Times guest essay, MSNBC anchor Chris Hayes claimed that in under a month, all of his worst fears have been realized in regard to how new Twitter owner Elon Musk has run his new social media platform. So, I mean, like, first off, his worst nightmare, I'm like, does he losing sleep over this? Hayes claimed that Musk courted some of the worst trolls on Twitter, and I assume he's talking about maybe Trump, has scared off advertisers and cut staff that handle the basic functions of the platform. Hayes also expressed worry that under Musk, the platform may break down and stop working altogether. Hayes began his guest essay by describing Musk's handling of Twitter as a near-death experience, if not the end of it entirely. He wrote, "If Twitter survives, and I fervently hope it does, its near-death experience has revealed something fundamentally about our online lives. The digital space of civic lives, the public town square, as Mr. Musk deemed Twitter, has been privatized to our collective detriment." It's an opinion piece. He can say whatever he wants. I got to get to this last part. There's one last line he puts in here that was great. I'm not going to find it. But anyway, he says, oh, yeah. So first off, it's like he's like, the company, this whole thing could break down and break, and like this is what he's worried about. Isn't that Elon? Like any company could do that, right? Could shut down if they don't have enough staff. But it's like they laid off. I think there was, how many people did he lay off? Do you know how many?
There were 7,000 employees, and then a whole bunch of like contractors. So it was like 3,500 or something.
Them. It was like 3,500. Yeah.
So someone made this point the other day. WhatsApp was bought by Mark Zuckerberg for, I think, $9 billion. And do you know how many employees they had?
A lot.
50.
WhatsApp had 50 employees
when it was purchased. Yes.
Man, I wish I worked for WhatsApp. Dang.
Yeah, they probably got a good check, all of them. But it's the point is like, you don't have to have 6,000 employees to run a platform. You're like and from the stories I heard, there was a lot of there was like a day of rest that was an article, right? Elon Musk canceled day of rest, which was like once a month, they all took a day off, just an extra day. And it was like, and he's ordering people to come into the office. What a jerk. And you're like, okay, I'm like, why does this make him a villain? I'm like, I don't understand it at all. And it's like the company is losing money, as Ryan said, and he's trying to stop it from losing money. And I'm like, I don't even understand. And the best part is they making him out to be a villain because he's laying off all these people. Is there any accountability for the previous leadership that got this company in such a dire situation? And like everyone's like, oh, who cares about them? They're fine. Oh, about that jerk Elon Musk trying to stop.
They cashed out and were like, peace.
Yeah, but
I cashed out.
But what about an article of like, hey, former leadership, thanks a lot for losing $3 million a day and letting me leave, right? Elon Musk made a bad, I think Ryan, you were even saying that, like in between the lines, that he overpaid for the company.
Oh, everybody knows he overpaid.
Yes.
He overpaid.
But that's on him. But like, that doesn't mean he's a bad person or like,
no.
Or that like he's a villain for it. But where is this last part? It was like, oh, the world's no, where is it? They say, basically he says no man should have this much power. When he's basically talking about the trim. I'm like, oh, we suddenly have issues with someone having a rich person buying a media company, or like Jeff Bezos buying the New York Post, Mark Zuckerberg owning Facebook. No, you're just worried that a person you don't agree with has now owns a media platform. And
okay,
so
I'll agree with that to a certain extent.
That's
I have some
actually a pretty
counterpoints
good point.
to that,
Yeah.
but I think that that's a great point.
Yeah.
It's I've never seen so many articles come out of the woodwork attacking someone for just trying to make a company profitable. And my last thought is and everyone's like, it's doom and gloom. He's half. I mean, part of that is people have been boycotted. Like, people have literally been calling companies and being like, oh, you shouldn't support Twitter anymore, and you should pull your advertising. So people are like trying to sabotage Elon, like downright. And like, there's this whole articles about moving.
I don't know if there's I don't know if there's much evidence of that. I've read a couple of articles saying that like there's not a lot of evidence of people necessarily reaching out to sponsors. A lot of these companies are pulling their sponsorships
for other reasons.
Well,
yeah, they're worried about the content.
Well, like maybe the N-word usage going up like 7,000% on Twitter.
I even read an article about a university trying to like saying, hey, we're no longer using Twitter and nobody else should, and we're all moving over. Everyone has to move all of their accounts over to Mastodon, deliberately trying to get off the platform, just because a person who seems to have conservative leaning views is now owns it. That is
this is impossible for me to agree
my last
with
point
your
is
takes on this.
So that's
but
okay.
I have some
you
criticisms I want to make.
Yeah. The last thing I'd say is someone told me this once, and it's like, don't ever bet against Elon Musk. And it's like Tesla, that at one point was the most shorted company in the world, and just continues to destroy. Like, anyone who tries to bet against it has always destroyed them. He is by evidence alone, he is the best business business
person
owner that has ever lived. I mean, that just by the
I
evidence
vehemently disagree with that, Dave, on every aspect, on every level.
Good. Okay, but that's not the point, right? So the point is, can you also offer critique? So really quick,
yes,
I just want to summarize really quick Tom's point. And I think it's pretty easy to summarize this, right? Basically, the media has turned Elon Musk buying Twitter into a Chicken Little the sky is falling type situation, right? Which is actually interesting. Are either of you on Twitter as a platform? I know, Tom, you're not. Nate, are you on there at all?
I use Twitter more than I'd like to admit.
Yeah, I'm on there. Probably the same, more than I would like to admit. I don't post a whole lot, though I did actually tweet today in response to an article that was kind of interesting. So yeah, I think that's kind of interesting, right? And I think, Tom, you made some really good points. Yeah. All right, Nate, your turn. How would you critique the media's response to Elon Musk buying Twitter?
Can you do this, Nate?
So there were
deep breath.
There were a few points that I actually really agreed with. And I would say specifically around the aesthetics of maybe focusing on the business decisions that Elon made after purchasing Twitter, and really hyper focusing in on those things. Now, the critique I'm going to make is kind of from the opposite perspective, in the sense of like, I don't think that the media has been harsh enough. And I mean that in the way of like actually critiquing the concept of billionaires coming in and making purchases of giant platforms like Twitter, like WhatsApp, like Instagram, and the FTC allowing this to go through. This is where I would say the media has not critiqued this enough, because it has been unfair on Elon to the extent of it seems that it has been hyper focused on Elon's decision to purchase Twitter has been an attack on free speech, because now a single person owns Twitter, right? It's now a private company instead of a public company, and there are a lot of ramifications that this person gets to make decisions for Twitter, a public a public social media platform that most everybody has access to use, right? I would agree that the media doesn't do a good enough job attacking and criticizing other giant companies and less so individuals, but I think the easiest one to make a direct comparison to would be Mark Zuckerberg going in and purchasing WhatsApp, but also Instagram, where giant companies can come in, buy out a competitor. Elon Musk wasn't really a competitor in this scenario. Can buy out a competitor and have so much access to that space. So my critique would be more so that it hasn't been criticized enough. There's a couple side caveats I'd make to that, but I'm curious what you think about that initially, Tom.
You're worried about like the monopolistic power of the purchase, and that it might be yielded to like influence, or what? I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean,
and you're talking about this generally, right? You're talking about this with Facebook, and you're talking about this with other big medias, right?
Yeah,
some person
and I'm
comes
kind
in
of taking
and
that from the perspective of I'm concerned about monopolies. Well, monopolies forming. Monopolies already exist in the U.S., but about monopolies, you've got Disney who have purchased up Hulu and who have purchased up ESPN and are basically have a whole conglomerate.
6 companies own all the media.
Exactly.
In the entire United States, right.
And so when we take a step back and look at like where all of our media sources are coming from, like there's not many different sources of ownership and perspectives that we have access to. The internet was supposed to be this open source, everybody gets a voice platform, but like the 3 biggest websites used are Google, Facebook, and what's the other one? There's another one. I think it's Instagram.
Wikipedia.
I think it's Instagram, which is Facebook.
Which is Facebook.
And so at that point, I'm kind of getting off topic here, but at that point, my point being that, like, yes, I think that the media is focusing too hard on dunking on Elon Musk personally.
Do you think they're being petty?
He's an easy target because he makes himself an easy target because he makes everything about him. He likes when everybody's talking about him, kind of like Donald Trump. It's crazy. There must be some correlation with billionaires and how much they like to be talked about on the media, certain billionaires at least. But I think that it's easy to be unfair in that sense. I think there are a lot of ramifications that have come with the Twitter purchase and the decisions that Elon has made, specifically around Twitter Blue and the absolute chaos that ensued after that. I can't remember the name of the company for the life of me. I was trying to Google it on the side here while you were talking, and I got a million other results. But
the company, what company?
So there were a couple companies. There were 2 companies in specific. One was a manufacturer of EpiPen, and the other one was, I believe, Northrop Grumman. It was another. Grumman, yeah. It was another. It was a defense contractor. People made what looked like legit verified accounts of both of these companies.
Right.
Made a really spicy, out there take. The one specifically on EpiPen was saying, "Hey, we're going to make EpiPen completely free," and their stock crashed like 12% overnight. Like people started selling it off because they thought it was a legitimate tweet. And it had real life ramifications from an investor standpoint, which I don't really care too much about, but from an investor standpoint, because we trust this thing.
Right.
And I think that the media has not criticized those types of things as much as they have criticized Elon doing annoying things, and doing things like laying off half of Twitter. I don't agree necessarily with the layoffs, but I have less of a bone to pick about the layoffs than I do about creating the chaos, which allowed people to essentially make fake accounts and tweet things that look legitimate. It opens up the door for a lot of issues that are now essentially being made by a single person because he had enough money to just say, "Hey, I want to mess around and buy Twitter." So
right,
yeah, interesting.
I don't think that they've been fairly criticizing the right points. They've been hyper focused on Elon Musk rather than the ramifications of billionaires coming in and messing with things.
So just quick summary, and then we'll continue the conversation. What it sounds like, and I think you got this right at the end, right? Is that the media, your critique is that the media are actually making the wrong critique, right? They're focused on these petty issues tied to Elon Musk and not the bigger issue, which is, should a billionaire be able to do this? Another thing that I think is actually kind of interesting, almost the same time that Elon Musk laid off roughly 3,500 Twitter employees, Facebook laid off about 11% of its workforce, which is about 11,000 people, right? So it's like more than twice the number of, it's like 3 times the number almost that were laid off at Twitter. And that made, headlines for almost a day, right? But then it just disappeared, right? Like, big deal, whatever, which I think is kind of interesting, right? So Twitter's getting hammered, right? Elon Musk is getting hammered for these layoffs, which again, it's as a relative percentage, it's more, right? But in absolute numbers, it's a third of the people who are laid off. Yep, it affects less people. But no one is letting that go with Twitter, whereas with Facebook, it was in the media for a couple of days and then it disappeared. Anyway,
Amazon just started their 10,000.
Yeah, so they're cutting 10, people too. So Tom, thoughts in response to Nate's critique?
I actually think, so this is interesting. Yeah, I agree with him in the sense that, I think it's almost like the media is, because like that's a more deeper kind of compelling argument that I think what Nate is saying is like, these are actually the bigger concerns. And I think the media is just going for low hanging fruit, and they're like, he's a meanie, and you shouldn't be on Twitter, and I do think it's petty, and I think it's totally they're just driven by the fact they don't like him and they don't want. It's a very much a Donald Trump kind of an argument of like, oh, he did this one weird thing, and so he's stupid and dumb. And you're like, give me a real argument here, right? And I think that's what Nathan's trying to present. Yeah. And
on that point, ultimately that's what polarizes us, right? Is we feel like we have to pick a side of like, oh, well, am I team Elon or not team Elon? Am I team Donald Trump or not Donald Trump? Yes. Because the media kind of presents it as like, you have to take that side of like, this person isn't inherently good or bad. Now, I'd argue that I don't think that Elon Musk is good in any shape, way, or form, but I think that has more to do with a critique, I think, maybe on how media is presented and how we consume media, I guess, more so than like worried about poor Elon Musk getting picked on.
No, I think so basically we already did a thing on Twitter, and this is before Elon Musk owned it, and the argument we came to was like, Twitter can do whatever they want. They're a company, right? And
they are a private company. They are a private company.
And then like, until they became a utility and someone said, no, this really is a public square and we're going to make it a utility, then they can do whatever they want. Right. And then to their detriment. And he's going to create the blue check mark. And if it doesn't work, he's going to not do it. And I guess what I say is, so there's people I won't defend. And like Donald Trump's one of those people. Like, I'm like, I'm not with the Don, whatever they call him. But Elon Musk, he has proven time and time again, he is a genius. And like there is no one better at resource allocation than Elon Musk. No one holds a candle. And like, I trust him. He will make Twitter like profit. He'll make it profitable.
What about, and feel free to rein this back as soon as it goes off the rails, Ryan. Okay. But what about Elon Musk do you feel like makes him a genius?
Resource allocation. So
in what sense?
He knows. So I'll give you like several examples. He knows exactly, the chip shortage that happened, right? Okay. He saw it coming long ahead of time, and they hedged against it, right? And so they were minimally affected by that. Whereas Ford and GMC had cars,
as far as Tesla,
thousands of cars sitting on their lot, like waiting for a chip to get in, so because they didn't see it coming. That's just one simple example. He is a genius. He knows, he's seeing 2 steps ahead of everybody else.
Is that why do you feel like that's Elon Musk specifically who is the genius of that? And because obviously Tesla as a company made the decision to get ahead of the chip shortage, and I think it's
Yes.
easy to equate that to, well, Elon owns Tesla, so like Elon's the genius here. But like,
Yes.
what specifically about Elon Musk do you feel like is the genius?
Well, he hires the people that make those decisions, right?
Okay, so he hires
And so,
good people.
right. Well, and
Okay.
that's the best thing a leader could do is hire good
Is hiring
people.
good people. All right,
Yeah.
I'm gonna rein this back in because Tom, you said
Okay.
something that I think is actually really interesting. A colleague of mine was involved in this lawsuit, and so I kind of want to bring it up because it is kind of interesting.
The Twitter lawsuit, like around
No,
purchasing.
no, this is a different lawsuit. It was a very obscure one, and again, only because I know this person personally was I made aware of it. When Donald Trump was president, okay, there is a Twitter account for the POTUS, right? President of the United States, POTUS Twitter account. Okay.
Yes.
When that
This
this
is about him deleting tweets or something like that, right?
blocking people.
Oh, blocking people. Yes, yes.
Okay, which is fascinating because
he is a public
platform
figure,
right?
Yeah.
So because he's a public figure, he's a political figure. A colleague of mine, sociologist, he actually got blocked by the POTUS account, and he and a whole bunch
Sounds
of other
like a
people
cool
who
guy.
got blocked, right?
Trolling.
He was actually trolling the president, which I think is funny. But they were trolling the
As you
president,
should be able
right?
to
They
do.
got blocked, and they filed a lawsuit. And they won that
Right.
lawsuit, and they had to be unblocked because in that situation, even though Twitter is a private company, right? Even when it's publicly traded, it's still a private company, right? The
Right.
government doesn't own it. So in that situation, the government said, "You are a public platform. You in this specific account, right?
Right.
You cannot block
In
these
this
people
circumstance.
in this very specific circumstance. You are effectively a utility, right?
Totally.
You're like a public
Yeah.
square at a university, right? A state university. They have to allow everybody to come on the campus, including white supremacists, to talk, right? So does that change anything when we wrestle with the idea that, like, in some ways, Twitter is a public platform, particularly when it comes to politicians using that platform?
Well, yeah, I mean that's what Elon said. It was the town square, right? And he's saying this is the place where people go and talk, and everyone should be able to talk. And that's so. Do they have the right, right? And what can Twitter do? And that's very interesting that we're bringing up this conversation. Because a few months ago we're like, oh no, Twitter can do whatever they want. But that's fine. But yeah, I think it'll bear out. But yes, it gets complicated, right? When you have presidents using Twitter exclusively, like President Trump did.
I mean, I think Elon's really forcing the hand of either the FTC, or I think it's going to be the FTC that may make a decision on this. Or at least open an investigation into really starting a broader conversation of, like, at what point do platforms like Twitter and Facebook and all these other social media platforms transcend the private company the private company perspective, right? Of, hey, yeah, we're a private company. We can make whichever decisions we want. We can ban whoever we want. We can allow whatever we want. We can disallow whatever we want, to actual free speech. Because people love to talk about free speech on Twitter, but like, it's a stupid conversation, because when we're talking about free speech in regards to the First Amendment, we're not talking about Twitter. The First Amendment has nothing to do with Twitter. First Amendment has to do with laws being passed by Congress that disallow or that inhibit free speech, the freedom of press, and what the government can prevent you from saying / doing, rather than what you can and can't do in the court of public opinion. And those are two very different things that have been happening a lot. I mean, look at the Kanye West situation of Kanye saying a bunch of crazy anti-Semitic things and having real world consequences to that. He has the freedom of speech to say any of those things. The government can't come after him for saying anti-Semitic things, but he can be banned off Twitter. He can be dropped by his sponsors. He can be ostracized by society for saying things that are not within what the general consensus of acceptable speech is. So that's a really much broader conversation, and I think there is going to become a point very soon where I wish I was part of that conversation, where somebody in a position of power start having a broader conversation of what sort of regulation needs to be put in place around these platforms, and are these considered public utilities more so than the sense of can people profit off of a public utility in the way that Elon Musk is, or lose money off of it?
Yeah, well,
in his situation.
To see what happens. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we're getting worried about it right now.
Okay. I think that was actually interesting. Right. So, again, kind of just summarizing to some extent. Both of you offered critiques on both perspectives, right? Both issues, and they weren't the same critiques, right? But at the same time, we're both able to find areas where we're like, we do actually agree. And this gets to the heart of the podcast, right? We're finding common battlegrounds, things that we're like, okay, this is a problem. In the first case, right, like arresting people who registered to vote and the state approved them to vote. Both of you agreed that's a problem. And the critiques, the media critiques of Elon Musk, both of you agreed problematic, not necessarily for the same reasons, right? But at some level, I think there's actually quite a bit of agreement, because you're both like, these are really kind of petty things that they're critiquing Elon Musk about, and they're certainly not leveling the same types of critiques at other places. So I think we found common ground. Yeah.
Ding, ding, ding.
I mean, I think we did.
Interesting, right? I'll wrap up with this one final point. So as we were discussing, different ways to address this, and this actually goes back to our very last episode with Josh in the last season, we kind of said like how we can find common ground is having a common enemy. Effectively, that's what we're doing here, right? We're taking an issue, critiquing that issue, and strangely, by critiquing that issue, we end up finding common ground. I think that's kind of interesting. Any final points from either of you?
No.
Tom, you're wrong about everything, but we agreed on a couple things.
Nice. We'll keep the conflict in here because people like conflict. We know that it's
I love the conflict. That's why I'm here.
I'm not even entirely sure. Nathan's like, I sort of like, okay, they were wrong, but for all the wrong reasons, and I'm not going to agree with you on anything.
It's so hard not to like.
I can see the pain.
Oh, it's so hard not to just put all of your personal like feelings about things into the argument. But the argument we were trying to make is find that common disagreement
in that area.
That common battleground, and I am willing to concede that notion.
The one for me was pretty easy, I think, and for me to be like, yeah, it's bad to arrest people when they haven't broken the law.
Most people agree on that.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be one I'll be like, right. But,
sure. I think a lot of people well, we won't get back into that, but I think a lot of people would make the argument that they're felons, so they don't have rights anymore. But that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Look for another episode soon. And if you have feedback, be certain to let us know, email us, drop a comment somewhere on one of the platforms where this is posted. We'll see you soon.
Tom, look, we don't always agree when it comes to politics. But if there's one thing that we do agree on, it's that there's only one way to clean up after going to the bathroom, and that's with a Lux bidet.
Listen, I've been using bidets forever, all right? And Lux is the best, all right? So, I mean, I've got like the little squatty potty thing and the bidet. It's like a whole experience. It's probably one of the highlights of the entire day. But like, it gets me clean and it gets me ready to talk politics in a civilized manner.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. Every time that I use a toilet, it doesn't have a bidet. When I go to a friend's house, I just don't use their toilet, first of all. But that's about as uncivilized as it gets. So civil conversations demand civil hygiene practices.
That's why everyone should get a bidet.
And just to be clear, right, we want to make it clear, listeners can get their own Lux bidet with 10% off by ordering at luxbidet.com and using our promo code FCBG10, Finding Common Battlegrounds 10. And the last thing that we want to say, Lux is supporting this podcast, but they don't support one side or the other. They support civil conversations and clean butts.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Finding Common Battlegrounds. The music is by Ben Sound. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not those of their employers. For more information or more episodes, you can find us at findingcommonbattlegrounds.com.
You're too easy to get you to. You're Tom. I don't know if you're passionate about a lot of things enough to like really get into it with me.
You know, that is
Right.
about the most passionate I've seen Tom when he was like reading
Okay.
that Chris Hay stuff.
Yes.
He was
And I
pissed off
loved
about
that.
You're legit pissed off about that, aren't you?
that got me fired up for sure. And
I don't
I-
think I've seen you that fired up in a long time.
But
Oh,
here's
yeah.
here's what I don't
But I
understand.
agree with Nathan. Yeah, because I'm just like, yeah, you're right. That's totally true. And then, I don't. There's only certain hills I'll die on, but I get it. I don't know if I'm combative enough.
What is it about that article that gets you so fired up?
Oh, that he cares about all this stuff. He's all these things he cares about that you could apply to any company. That's what I'm just saying. Oh, I'm like my worst nightmare is that Facebook's going to go down tonight, right? You're like, really? That's your worst nightmare? And like the guy's just pulling. I want to say bad things about Elon Musk, and this is the best I can come up with. Is what.
And they're not great arguments anyway.
No.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like all of his
Okay.
arguments are totally stupid, irrelevant, and aren't really applicable to just specifically Elon Musk. They're applicable to anybody. Therefore, they're not really like you're just targeting Elon Musk because you don't like Elon Musk. And like, but I'm finding a reason, and they're all these, and so they're all just dumb reasons, right?
Okay, and that comes back to our better point of that's what we fundamentally agree on, is that we're just finding reasons to criticize Elon Musk and finding anything that is a criticism rather than coming to the heart of the issue, which is like you feel a certain way about what Elon Musk is doing, but rather than make a point about that in your article, we're just going to dance around the
Yeah,
meat
I mean,
potatoes.
It's almost like Elon Musk is the equivalent of our royalty, right? Like we don't have a king or a queen to talk about. So we talk about billionaires.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yes.
we do, but like I agree with Nathan in that Elon Musk is a lightning rod, right? And he asks for a lot of this stuff because
He
he's
loves it.
very out there. And some would even say he's thin skinned, right? Because he'll react to people on Twitter. But like I think, you know, it was about a year and a half ago or something. He's been making this progression to be more conservative, at least being more outspoken about it. And I think the media is just like turned on him hard. And I think they're always like, oh, we don't like billionaires, but they would throw, you know, Jeff Bezos isn't getting blasted, right, with all this stuff, right? And right, he should be, and he's not. And like I think he went conservative and then now has turned against it. It's very much a Donald Trump is like, oh, you're our enemy now, we're gonna attack you no matter what you do.
So the heart of the issue for you
ridiculous.
is that because Elon leans conservative, is at least more out about conservative, it bothers you that media conglomerates seem to attack him more because he's conservative, or in part that he's conservative less than they do other billionaires who are making controversial decisions but aren't as outwardly political or maybe lean liberal.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. That they're attacking him because he's conservative. That's what you're saying, right? Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, I 100% agree with that, actually.
It's like, so what I don't get is, and I could go both ways on this totally, because that's why I didn't want to talk about the first discussion, because you were like Republicans auditing the
Ukrainian
Ukraine. I'm
aid.
like, yeah, that's the dumbest thing ever, right? I'm like, a couple of points there. Why would you audit our spending bill on Ukraine? Ukraine's trying to win the war. Of course, they're going to spend that money as effectively as possible. But what I'm saying is, you don't audit someone's spending bill when they're at war. You audit when you're at peace, right? That's when the money gets corrupted. Because guess what? Zelensky has more motivation than anyone in the world to spend that money as effectively as possible, right? In however he can do to win that war. But it's like, but like my thing is like we should be why that? Well, then let's audit everything, right? Where's our fiscal integrity everywhere else? And so they're just using it as a political weapon. And so like, that's why I'm like, I'm not
Easy.
like, I'm on the liberal side on this one.
That's
so like,
maybe that should have been our topic, because
That's interesting.
I would have taken the exact opposite stance of like, I agree with the Republicans on that for different reasons, but I think that the Ukraine foreign aid needs to be audited. Absolutely.
interesting.
Fascinating. All right, maybe we'll have to cover that next
We
time.
may have to bring that up next time.
But what was my point of bringing that up? I can't even remember. But I was saying that there's a lot of things, like I'll call out something if it's stupid, right? And like that's why I was always like, my biggest critique of Congress being against Donald Trump building the wall, right, or wanting to build the wall was was spending. And I'm like, spending? I'm like, we're spending billions of dollars here, over here, like we're spending, and a fraction goes to this wall. And that's the thing you're concerned about? You're like, oh, that's going to cost a lot. I'm like, when is that ever coming out of your mouth, Congress? That's gonna cost a lot. And you're like, all of a sudden you're worried about it. You're like, it's because you don't like Donald Trump and it's political and this is that. Just call a duck, right? But it's like, but yeah. So it's like, I don't, that's why I think it's absurd that like, we're like, oh, I don't like the way he laid people off. You're like, oh, it was, we were at this dinner table, and your brother, Brendan, he was going on about Elon Musk, and we're like, well, what? I don't like it, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, what makes you bad about him? I don't like the way he's doing this Twitter merger. I'm like, what? I'm like, you're like, do you get after all CEOs for their for the way they went around their merger? Right. This is before he'd even bought it. He was like,
Sure.
And you're like, you're mad about him. Like, where is this outrage for any other CEO anywhere else in the world? Right. It's just like, it's contrived. And I'm like, I'm just like, it's silly and hypocritical, but
it's just political. It's political.
Yes, it's political.
Political outrage.
It's all politics.
It's all
At the end of the
politics.
day, it's all everything we do
politics.
and say is
Yes,
politics.
but news is not
It's all
supposed to
politics.
do that, right?
Absolutely, it is.
But that's what they do. They do, but it costs them credibility.
Oh, you're saying the news is not supposed to? I mean, it's not supposed to.
It's supposed to be
bias one way or
more
another.
objective. Yeah.
Yeah.
The news is supposed to report the news, not comment on the news, right?
No,
Correct.
Right.
But
Not report on a story, not create a story.
But
Yeah.
the
that
meta
doesn't
critique
sell.
there, well, it doesn't. But the meta critique is what the news chooses to cover is a reflection of their biases, right? So they can still
Yes.
cover things objectively.
Through editing. Mhm.
Right. So they can cover things objectively by trying to present both sides or whatever they're doing. But the fact that they're covering a story
Mhm.
at
Yes.
some level reveals a bias that this is important, right?
And we'll
So you
never
can always find
remove
that,
those
yeah.
biases completely. Obviously.
No, you can't. It's impossible.
No, you
Yeah.
don't. And I think we're at a stage where if there was a news agency that was right down the middle and reported everything
No, there are.
evenly, would go out of
You
business.
don't read them, but it's because they source everything else, because it's
That's-
called the routers and AP, and they just source the news for every other media agency to then go spin off of, and then
Right.
actually get the clicks. So
Right, and
if you
that's
look
what
at
I'm saying.
if
The
you look at
AP
every news article, it's like, oh, who is the original? And they're not
Author.
perfect,
They
but
don't
who's
do
the
all of
original
it, yeah.
author? And it's always routers or AP.
Right.
Yeah,
And
Reuters
like they've
and AP.
become the
thank you.
subcontractor of our media industry,
Mhm.
basically. That's what I'm saying. They're now just the worker bee. They're worker bee, right? It's they're not even like
They're the journalists, and
no
everybody
one's
else
like,
is the
I gotta
spin
go through, I
piece.
gotta pay that AP paywall, right? You're like, nobody's saying that. It's like they're going to the Wall Street Journal or wherever they can get their
True.
bias, right? It's
Gosh, sorry, I don't want to.
that's what I'm saying.
Supposed
There's
to
no,
be
there's no
having
money.
ended the podcast, but we're all talking about this stuff. This is why
I
you
know.
don't stop recording, I guess.
That's
pretty typical.
exactly why you've caught it,
Yeah.
because we have good conversations after, and this gets
Yeah.
added as bonus content. So we'll tack some of this on.
I
But
was trying to look at a lot of these articles to like prep for this, and I was like,
Mhm.
it also was a big indicator of like how many articles am I actually reading, because like I like to read articles, but I don't read an article if there's a paywall, and
Mhm.
like. And so if I just click on it casually and there's a paywall, I just ignore it, don't think about it again. But when I was like really actually trying to like understand the meat and potatoes in some of these issues, I was like, I can't find anything without a paywall.
Mm.
So I can't get as much information as I'd like to on some of
Well,
these
so
posts.
I will. If you do run into that, I do have access for 2 that are paywalled through my university. So I have an
Nice.
account through the New York Times through my university and the Wall Street Journal through my university. So they actually pay for me to have access to both of those media outlets, which I actually kind of like. That, like, I think Wall Street Journal leans slightly to the right. Some would say it's really far to the right, but I think it's, to the right, but not radically to the right. And the New York Times probably leans slightly to the left, not radically to the left, but slightly to the left. So I get a pretty balanced picture, and I can go to either of those. I don't get the one that Jeff Bezos owns, which is the Washington Post. I don't have access to that one. So and then I do actually pay for my
New
local
York
paper.
Post?
You did, but
New York Post is one too.
Yeah.
I read a lot of New York Post, actually, and that's very right-leaning. Very right-leaning.
But then I
read
also
a
read
lot
my
of New
local
York
paper,
Post.
which I pay for my
what?
local paper. So
What's right-leaning?
I've never heard
New
of
York
that.
Post.
The local paper.
Those do exist in some larger cities, right? Like Tampa, we have the Tampa Bay Times, which is a Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper outlet.
Which was the article that you linked, and I actually went and read. I like that. Okay, perfect.
Yes. So we actually do have good reporting in my city, but then again, my city has more people than your entire state does.
Yeah. Well, that is Tampa versus Utah. So
yes, the Tampa Bay area has
Tampa Bay area has
3 million people.
Okay, so not quite more than Utah, but like
Utah has like
pretty dang
2.7 million, I think.
No,
so
I
we
think we're
have
like 3.7.
We should check, but I don't think you're more than 3 million people.
No, we're 3.3. So
Are you
you're
really?
a lot closer than I thought.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, 3.3. Okay. We'll wrap it up there.